Everything you've been told about how long the ancient Greeks lived is wrong. You've probably heard they died at 30. And in some ways, it is the most misleading half-truth in all of history. Because the people who built the foundations of Western civilization did not just scrape by and die young. Many of them grew genuinely, robustly old. And they did it without a single doctor, pill, or supplement that we would recognize today. Let me show you what that looks like 2,500 years later. On a small island in the Aegean, a man in his 90s walks out to his garden before sunrise. He tends his vegetables and climbs the hill home, a climb that would wind most tourists. His mind is sharp, and in his entire life, he has never swallowed a single longevity supplement. His name does not matter, because on the island of Ikaria, he is not unusual. He is the rule. In Ikaria, roughly 1 in 3 people live into their 90s, and they stay almost free of the dementia and chronic disease that define old age across the developed world. No biohackers, no cold plunges, no $400 supplement stacks. And here is what those researchers eventually realized. This is not a fluke of one island. It is an inheritance. Habits carried down family to family, generation to generation, all the way from ancient Greece. The same way of living that let their ancestors grow old is quietly still working today. So what did they actually do that made them old then and can still make us old now? That is what the rest of this video is about. Stay to the end, because the most powerful piece of it is the part almost everyone gets wrong. Before we get to the secret, let's kill the diet at 30 myth for good, because once you understand it, you will never be fooled by it again. Yes, average life expectancy at birth in ancient Greece was somewhere around 25 to 35 years. But that number is a statistical trap. It is crushed downward by staggering child mortality. Roughly a third of infants died before their first birthday, and about half of children before the age of 10. Those losses gut the average. But they say almost nothing about how long an adult lived, because once a Greek reached 15, the math transformed. Their life expectancy jumped into the mid-50s, even reaching the 60s and 70s sometimes. The skeletons confirm it. The average age of death for adults in classical Greece works out to roughly 38 to 43, and the famous names Sophocles, Plato, and Democritus reportedly lived into their 80s and 90s. So the question is how, with none of our medicine, so many of them got old, and why we, surrounded by all of it, are now drowning in the very diseases they escaped. The answer is not one thing. It is a system. Now let's take it apart, piece by piece. The first secret isn't a food, a herb, or a potion. It's something you've already done 100 times today without thinking, and the Greeks built their entire culture around it. They walked everywhere. Their greatest thinkers turned it into a method. Aristotle's followers were literally called the peripatetics, those who walk because they did their deepest thinking on the move. And around 400 BC, the father of Western medicine, Hippocrates, wrote a line modern science has spent the last decade proving true. Walking is man's best medicine. For 2,000 years, that sounded like a charming proverb. Then the data caught up. People who walk more than 8,000 steps a day cut their risk of dying early by roughly half, compared to those who barely clear 5,000. In a study following nearly 140,000 older adults, even walking less than the official recommendation still meaningfully lowered the risk of death versus sitting still. Think about what that does to your body. It cools chronic inflammation, the slow internal fire that quietly drives nearly every disease of aging. It steadies blood sugar, guards the heart, and feeds the brain. A man walking his hills into his 90s isn't doing a workout. He's doing exactly what kept his ancestors alive. But all that movement builds an appetite. And what the Greeks walked home to eat is where this really begins. So what was on that plate that no company has ever managed to bottle? the answer starts with something almost certainly in your kitchen right now, and that you are almost certainly using wrong. Olive oil. It was one leg of the ancient Mediterranean trio, wheat, oil, and wine, on the Greek table at nearly every meal, essentially unchanged for over 2,000 years. To them, it was just food. To a modern biochemist, it is one of the most fascinating anti-aging substances ever studied. And the power is not in the fat. It is in compounds called polyphenols. 3 names worth remembering: hydroxytyrosol, oleoropyne, and oleocanthal. They do not just mop up damage, they reach into the machinery of aging itself. In 2025, a randomized controlled trial gave hydroxytyrosol to overweight pre-diabetic adults and measured significant improvements across 7 separate markers of inflammation and oxidative stress. In the lab, olive polyphenols even quiet down senescent cells, the zombie cells that stop working but refuse to die and poison the tissue around them. But here is what nobody at the supermarket tells you. Most of that power lives in fresh, early harvest oil, the green, peppery kind that stings the back of your throat when you swallow it straight. That sting has a name: oleocanthal. The burn is the medicine working. The pale, smooth oil that has sat on a shelf for a year has lost most of it. So they had the oil. But oil was only one corner of a plate that looked nothing like yours. And the next part grew wild, for free, in the cracks of the hillsides. Picture an old Greek woman bent over in a field at the edge of the village, filling a basket. She isn't harvesting crops. She is gathering weeds, the kind of wild greens most of the modern world would mow down or spray with poison. The Greeks call them horta, and they've eaten them since the Bronze Age, their gathering and medicinal use recorded in the texts of Theophrastus, Pliny, and Dioscorides, written more than 2,000 years ago. On Crete alone, there are still around 300 edible wild greens picked to this day. When researchers analyzed dozens of these wild greens, they found that in most cases they beat cultivated vegetables, higher in polyphenols and denser in nutrients. The Greeks were eating, purely out of habit, some of the most nutrient-packed plants on Earth every day for free. And this plant-heavy, low-meat pattern is the most studied longevity diet in human history. In the pre-dimed trial, following a Mediterranean diet for 5 years was linked to longer telomeres, the protective caps on your DNA, and one of the most reliable clocks we have for biological age. In the Nurses' Health Study, researchers tracked 4,676 women and found the closer they ate to this pattern, the longer those telomeres stayed. That is about as close as science gets to catching food slowing aging in the act. Quick thing before the next one. If digging this kind of forgotten knowledge back out is why you are here, subscribe and hit like. That is genuinely what keeps this channel going. Because the next secret is not food at all. It is a drink, and their most famous doctor handed it out like a prescription. If I told you 2 of the most promising tonics in modern research were sitting in a Greek pantry 2,400 years ago, you would think I was reaching. But I am not. The first is vinegar. The Greeks drank it mixed with honey, a tonic called oxymel, and Hippocrates himself prescribed it. The modern numbers are real. A meta-analysis pooling 11 trials found vinegar, taken with a meal, significantly blunts the blood sugar spike that follows eating. Taken daily, it lowered fasting blood sugar, insulin, and long-term glucose markers in people at risk of diabetes. Now the honest part. Nobody has proven that vinegar makes you live longer. What it does is flatten the sugar spikes that drive glycation, where excess sugar caramelizes the proteins in your body and ages you from the inside. Not a fountain of youth, a brake on one of aging's quiet engines. The second drink is even less known. High in the mountains grows a plant the Greeks called sideritis. The physician Dioscorides documented it in the 1st century, making Greek mountain tea one of the longest recorded remedies in history. It is loaded with neuroprotective polyphenols. A double-blind randomized human trial has tested its effects on cognition and blood flow to the brain. And in Alzheimer's models, its extracts block the toxic plaques that define the disease. The human evidence is still early, but the direction is striking. So, here is a fair question. How many supplements in your cabinet can show you a 2,000-year track record and a randomized trial? And yet, none of these, alone, is the secret. The most powerful habit of all is the one almost everyone gets backwards. Here's the habit that breaks people's assumptions, because it's the absence of something, not the addition of it. The Greeks ate with restraint. Meals were small and frugal, and for most people, meat was a rarity, not a daily event. The Spartans took it furthest, with a single modest meal a day. To us, that sounds like deprivation. To your cells, it is a switch flipping on. When you go a real stretch without food, your cells trigger autophagy, literally self-eating. They hunt down their own worn-out, damaged parts and recycle them. It is your body's internal cleanup crew. And it only fully clocks in when you stop constantly feeding it. The discovery of how it works won the Nobel Prize in 2016. And in humans, the rigorous calorie trial found that eating less measurably slowed the rate of epigenetic aging. So now, the question this whole video has been circling is, what did the Greeks actually do that made them old then and still works now? And the real answer is, not any one of these. Instead, it is all of them, stacked together every single day for a lifetime. That is exactly why no pill can replace it. A supplement is, by definition, one thing. Their longevity was the sum of everything. The inflammation cooled from a dozen directions at once. The aging clock protected on every side. You cannot bottle a way of life. The hard part was never knowing the habits. It's wiring them back into a modern world built to strip them out. That's exactly what I built the art of living like a man around. Fuel, light, movement, recovery, and mind form one connected system with the science behind each. If this resonated, the link is in the description, and the code, the Ancient Way 10, takes 10% off. Now picture that man in his garden one last time. He never read a study. He couldn't tell you what a telomere is. He just inherited the way, and his body did the rest. The knowledge was never lost. It was only buried under everything we rushed to replace it with. The ancient way exists to dig it back out, and if this changed how you think about your next meal, you already know what to do.